r/AmItheAsshole for expelling my ex-girlfriend's kids on Christmas Eve. Hashtag chunk 1. My hands won't stop shaking. I'm staring at the disciplinary report sitting on my desk, and the words keep blurring together even though I've read it 15 times. Asterisk possession with intent to distribute. Found in the boys' locker during routine search. 2 ounces. Digital scale. Baggies, asterisk. December 23rd. 2 days before Christmas. 1 day before winter break. The fluorescent lights above my head hum their familiar tune, the same sound that's been the backdrop to my mornings for the past 8 years as principal of Harrison High. I've expelled students before. It's never pleasant, but it's always been clear-cut. Rules exist for reasons. Consequences exist so that rules matter. This time is different, and I know at the moment I realize I'm holding my breath. There's a soft knock on my office door. My secretary, Margaret, pokes her head in with that concerned expression she's perfected over the years. They're here, she says quietly. With their mother. Of course they are. Of course she's here. Give me 2 minutes, I tell her, and she nods sympathetically before closing the door. I lean back in my chair and rub my face with both hands. The office feels smaller than it did this morning. The walls seem to have moved closer while I was reading that report. Through my window, I can see the quad where students are finishing up their last day before break. Normal kids. Happy kids. Kids without mothers who've spent the last 6 months telling everyone in our mutual friend group that I was emotionally abusive and controlling. My phone buzzes. A text from Derek, my college roommate, asterisk hey man, heard about the twins. That's rough. Let me know if you need anything, asterisk. Word travels fast. I don't respond because what am I supposed to say? That I'm about to destroy the last connection I have to the family I thought I was building? That I'm about to confirm every story their mother's been telling about me, that I'm a cold, unfeeling authority figure who cares more about rules than people? 2 years. That's how long I was with Rebecca. 2 years of helping with homework at her kitchen table. 2 years of attending Jake and Marcus's soccer games. 2 years of Saturday morning pancakes and teaching them to drive on empty parking lots and talking to them about college applications and heartbreak and what it means to be a good person. 2 years of building something that died in a text message. I can still see the exact wording, asterisk this isn't working anymore. I need someone more emotionally available. I'm sorry, asterisk. She sent it while I was sitting in a hospital waiting room. While my mother's machines were beeping in steady, rhythmic patterns that seemed to count down something none of us wanted to acknowledge. I hadn't even read it until 6 hours later, after Mom's doctor had used the word comfortable in a way that made it clear she meant something else entirely. And Rebecca couldn't have waited. Couldn't have given me 72 hours. Couldn't have let me have 1 more week with my mother before dismantling my personal life. Of course not. That would have required actual emotional availability. The worst part isn't the breakup. The worst part is what came after. The narrative she constructed. I found out through Marcus himself, he'd mentioned, almost sheepishly, that their mom had been talking to their friends about our relationship. That she'd said I made her feel controlled and manipulated. That I had anger issues and was emotionally distant in ways that were actually cruel. Every accusation was designed to be just plausible enough. Not so extreme that people would dismiss it, but extreme enough that once they heard it, they couldn't unhear it. Suddenly, my habit of planning dates in advance became controlling. My preference for discussing serious relationship issues rather than yelling became emotional coldness. My decision to not take a job that would have required me to relocate became me putting myself first. And the twins believed her. Of course they did. She's their mother. Why would they doubt her? I haven't seen them since August. But now I have to look them in the eye and tell them I'm following mandatory expulsion policies. I have to be the villain in whatever story their mother's been telling. I have to use my professional authority, the thing that made me feel like I was building something good, that made me feel useful and purposeful and needed, as a weapon against 2 17-year-old kids who've already lost respect for me. The worst part is, I'm not even sure that's not exactly what I'm doing. That's the thought that keeps looping through my brain. That's what makes my hands shake. Am I really about to enforce school policy consistently and fairly, the way I should as an administrator? Or am I about to punish them because their mother broke my heart? Because I feel powerless in my personal life and the only power I have left is in this office? The question isn't whether they deserve consequences. They do. Dealing drugs on school property is serious. It's a safety issue. It's the kind of thing that can derail their futures if I don't intervene. But expulsion? On Christmas Eve? When there's every possibility that what's driving this decision is vengeance dressed up as principle. I pull up the student handbooks on my computer. The policies are clear. Possession with intent to distribute is listed under the mandatory expulsion section. No exceptions. No discretion. The policy exists because the previous principal, my predecessor, had been accused of letting wealthy families' kids off with warnings while poorer students got the book thrown at them. So the system was changed to remove discretion entirely. To prevent favoritism. To be fair. Except fairness isn't the only thing that matters, is it? Margaret's footsteps echo in the hallway. They're getting impatient out there. I straighten my tie, sit forward in my chair, and take a breath. Time to be the villain. Hashtag chunk 2. Rebecca looks exactly the same as she did the last time I saw her. That's the first thing that hits me when Margaret opens the door and they file in, Jake, Marcus, and their mother, single file like they're entering a confessional. She's wearing that green sweater. The one she wore on our second date. The one I told her looked perfect on her, and she wore it approximately 400 more times after that. Her dark hair is pulled back in the same bun she always favored when she wanted to look serious and professional. Strategic. That's a Rebecca move. The twins stand on either side of her like bodyguards, though they look more like prisoners being led to their sentencing. Which, I suppose, they are. Please, sit down, I say, gesturing to the 3 chairs I've arranged in front of my desk. Not beside it. In front of it. I didn't plan that. My subconscious did, and now we're all aware of the power dynamics in this room. I'm behind the desk. They're in front of it. This is already going poorly. Rebecca sits immediately, back straight, eyes meeting mine with that look she perfected, the one that says I'm the reasonable one here. The twins hesitate before sitting, their movements synchronized in the way twins' movements often are. Jake on the left, Marcus on the right. I've learned to tell them apart, but right now, they look identical in their anger. Identical in their contempt. Thank you for coming in on such short notice, I begin, and the formal words feel like ash in my mouth. We've had breakfast together. I've seen these kids in pajamas. I've watched them argue over the last pancake. And now I'm thanking them for coming in like this as a parent-teacher conference about a missing homework assignment. Let's skip the pleasantries, Rebecca says smoothly. I think we all know why we're here. And I want to be clear from the start, my son's made a serious mistake, but expulsion is not proportional punishment for teenagers who have no prior disciplinary record. The confidence in her voice makes me want to laugh. Of course she's already decided what's proportional. Of course she's framing this as me overreacting. That's always been her move, position herself as the rational one while everyone around her is ruled by emotion. The school's mandatory expulsion policy for possession with intent to distribute is a policy written by administrators, not by people who understand adolescent development, Rebecca interrupts. A policy designed to protect themselves from liability, not to actually educate or rehabilitate. My attorney looked at the statute this morning, and there's actually quite a bit of discretion built in once you factor in the your attorney. I can't help the edge that creeps into my voice. You called an attorney before coming to talk to me? Of course she did, Marcus says bitterly. His first words. His voice cracks slightly, and I realize with a jolt that he's scared. Genuinely frightened. You're the guy who was going to be at my graduation. You were going to help me move into the dorm next year. And now you're going to ruin our lives. The words hit like a punch because they're not entirely wrong. That's not fair, Marcus, I say, and I hear myself sound defensive. I sound like someone who needs to justify themselves. What you did. What we did is stupid, yeah, Jake says, his voice harder than his brother's. We know that. We've known it for the past 3 hours. But there's stupid, and then there's destroying your future over stupid. And you know what? You're destroying it because you're mad at mom. That's not true, I say, but the words sound hollow even to me. I'm following school policy. You could give us a suspension, Marcus says quietly. 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever. We'd do it. We'd accept that. But expulsion, right before Christmas, right before the college application deadline when all of this becomes permanent? That's not about policy. That's about punishment. Rebecca places a hand on Marcus's knee, and I watch the gesture with a sick feeling in my stomach. This is what they've been doing all fall, bonding against me. Becoming a unit. And I've been the outside threat that pulled them closer. The boys are willing to accept significant consequences, Rebecca says, her voice taking on that measured tone of someone who's rehearsed this speech. But they're also asking you to consider the full context. These are kids who have never been in trouble before. They made a poor judgment call. The drugs weren't for personal use, they were trying to make money for Christmas gifts because they didn't have enough from their part-time jobs. I look at Jake and Marcus. They don't deny this. Their expressions shift slightly, embarrassment mixing with the anger. They were selling drugs, I say slowly, making sure the words are clear. On school property. Where other students could have been exposed. Where it creates a safety and legal liability for the school. And they understand that, Rebecca says. But understanding their mistake and having their entire futures destroyed are two different things. I'm asking you, as someone who once cared about my family, to find another way. Please. The please lands wrong. It sounds manipulative. It sounds like all the time she's asked me for something while already deciding what my answer should be. And yet, I can also hear the genuine fear underneath it. She's afraid for her sons. I pull out my folder and open it, forcing myself to look at the facts rather than Rebecca's expression. The policy is mandatory, I repeat, but I know how I sound. I sound like I'm already looking for a way out of this, even though I'm saying the words that lock me in. Policies can be waived, Rebecca says. Discretion exists in these situations. You know this. You're the principal. You have the authority. And that's exactly why the policy is mandatory, I say, turning to face the twins directly. Because when principals start using discretion, that's when favoritism enters the system. That's when wealthy kids get warnings while poor kids get expelled. That's when powerful families get exceptions while nobody else does. So you're saying we should be expelled just to prove a point about administrative fairness? Jake's voice drips with sarcasm. That's actually insane. I'm saying the rules exist for everyone. Then why are you the one making the decision? Marcus asks. If the rules are truly the same for everyone, shouldn't this be handled by a committee? Shouldn't there be an appeals process? He's right. Of course there is. I know, even as I'm sitting here, that the district has multiple steps built in. Appeals. Hearings. Documentation requirements. I could recommend expulsion, and there would be a process. There would be time. There would be space for alternative solutions to present themselves. But I'm not thinking about process right now. I'm thinking about Rebecca in that green sweater, telling me she needed someone more emotionally available while my mother died. And I'm thinking about how using my authority to hurt her sons would be the cruelest thing I've done in my life. #chunk3. The silence that follows Marcus's question is the kind that fills a room like water. I can feel Rebecca noticing that I haven't answered. I can feel the twins noticing. Hell, Margaret probably noticed from behind her desk in the outer office. There is an appeals process, I finally say, and I watch Rebecca's shoulders relax slightly. She thinks I'm backing down. She thinks I'm about to give her the exception she came here for, wrapped up in procedure language so we can all pretend it's legitimate. The district requires a formal hearing with the superintendent's office. Documentation. The accused students would have the right to present their case with legal representation if necessary. Then that's what we'll do, Rebecca says immediately. We'll go through the formal process. We'll present the mitigating factors. We'll work within the system. The hearing is scheduled for January 8th, I say, and I watch her face fall. After the winter break. January 8th. Jake's voice jumps an octave. That's 3 weeks from now. My college applications are due January 15th. Early decision schools have already started making offers. I understand, I say, and I do. God, I do. I can see exactly how this plays out. 3 weeks of uncertainty. 3 weeks of Jake and Marcus waiting to hear if they're expelled, unable to certify their applications as pending no disciplinary action. 3 weeks of telling their guidance counselor, who will have to report it to schools. 3 weeks of watching their futures narrow. This is bullshit, Marcus says, standing up. This is punishment. You're punishing us for what? For Mom breaking up with you. Marcus, Rebecca says sharply, but he's already started. No, that's what this is. You were fine with us before. You were going to be at graduation. You were helping me with my essays. And the second Mom ended things, we became the enemy. We became the problem that needed solving. The anger in his voice is so pure, so justified by his own logic, that I feel something crack open in my chest. He truly believes this. Jake watches his brother's outburst with careful attention, letting Marcus be the one to say the dangerous things while he assesses my response. That's not fair, I say again, but I'm aware of how many times I've said that now. How defensive it sounds. How much like a lie. You want to know what's not fair? Rebecca leans forward, her voice dropping to that dangerous calm that used to terrify me because it meant she'd made a decision and nothing I said would change it. What's not fair is asking these boys to understand consequences while you hide behind policy because you can't handle your own emotions. What's not fair is using your position to hurt children who did nothing to you except exist in relation to someone who rejected you. They broke school policy, I say, but even as the words leave my mouth, I'm thinking about Marcus's face when he asked why I get to make the decision if the rules are the same for everyone. I'm thinking about the fact that 3 weeks ago, if a different principal's ex-girlfriend's kids had been caught dealing drugs on campus, I would have recommended suspension with mandatory counseling and community service. I would have done it without hesitation. But these aren't a different principal's kids. These are Jake and Marcus, who I taught how to parallel park. Who I took to their first college visits. Who asked me to write their recommendation letters before everything fell apart. I followed the mandatory expulsion policy, I say. That's my job. Your job is to be an educator, Rebecca says coldly. That policy is a tool, not a religion. You're choosing to use it as a weapon, and you're doing it because you're hurt. Because you're angry. Because you want to prove something to me by hurting my children. I want to prove that rules matter, I say, standing up now, because somehow I'm angrier than I was a moment ago. Angry at her for being here, for making me sit at my own desk and defend myself. Angry at myself for knowing she's partly right. I want to prove that I don't play favorites. That I don't let personal relationships influence my decisions. Then recuse yourself, Marcus says. His voice is steady now, the anger replaced with something colder. Something more devastating. If you can't be objective because of your personal relationship with our mother, then remove yourself from the decision. Let someone else make the call. Someone who isn't trying to prove something. He's right. Of course he's right. And I hate him a little bit for it. That's not how our district works, I say, but I'm already thinking about whether it could be. Whether I could hand this off to the assistant principal. Whether I could recuse myself and let someone else decide, someone without skin in the game, someone who wouldn't be accused of using policy as a weapon. Someone who wouldn't spend the rest of her life knowing she destroyed these kids because she was angry at their mother. Rebecca stands up. I think we're done here. We'll prepare for the hearing. We'll get an attorney. We'll make our case through the proper channels. She reaches over and touches Jake's shoulder, then Marcus's. Boys, we're leaving. Wait, I say, and I hate the desperation in my voice. We can discuss this. There's nothing to discuss, Rebecca says. She looks at me for a long moment, and I see something in her expression shift. The anger doesn't leave, but something else enters, a kind of pity. Like she's just realized something about me that she's been too angry to notice before. I loved you, she says quietly. I really did. But this? This isn't who I thought you were. This is someone smaller. Someone crueler. The words don't land the way she intends them to. They land harder, because they're not dramatic or accusatory. They're just sad. They're the kind of thing you say about someone who's disappointed you so thoroughly that you don't even have the energy to fight anymore. Jake and Marcus file out without looking at me. Rebecca follows, pausing in the doorway like she might say something else. She doesn't. She just closes the door with a soft click. I'm still standing behind my desk when Margaret knocks tentatively, asking if I need anything. I tell her no. I tell her to go home. I tell her it's almost Christmas, and she shouldn't be here. Alone in my office, I pull out the folder with Jake and Marcus's paperwork and I read through the district's appeal process again. I reread the part about recusal. I think about how easy it would be to step back, to let someone else decide this, to protect myself from the accusation that I'm using my power to hurt them. And I realize that stepping back wouldn't prove I'm objective. It would just prove I'm a coward. Chunk 4. The folder sits on my desk for 20 minutes before I close it. 20 minutes of staring at Jake and Marcus's faces in their student ID photos, Jake smiling that careful, calculated smile he uses when he knows the camera is on. Marcus mid-laugh, genuine, the way he looked before everything went to hell. I pull up the district intranet and look at Dr. Patricia Chen's calendar. The superintendent. She's the one who would typically hear the appeal, the neutral party who doesn't work in my building, who didn't watch these kids grow up in my office during study halls and college prep sessions. My finger hovers over her email address for a solid minute. All I have to do is type out a recusal request. Explain the conflict of interest. Let her take this off my hands. Marcus would see it as the right call, proof that I can be objective, that I'm not letting personal feelings dictate professional decisions. Rebecca would probably see it as an apology without me having to say the words. I close the email draft without sending it. The truth is, I'm not sure what I believe anymore. An hour ago, I was certain. Policy is policy. Rules exist for a reason. If you start making exceptions based on emotion, the whole system collapses. But that feels like something a character in a movie says right before the audience realizes he's the bad guy. My phone buzzes. A text from David Hernandez, one of the guidance counselors. Asterisk heard about the twins. Is it really expulsion? Asterisk. I don't answer. Instead, I navigate to the incident report filed by Officer Ramirez, who found them outside the gym. 2 ounces of marijuana. 14 baggies individually packaged. Clear intent to distribute, his report states. Jake had the drugs. Marcus had $60 in cash and a digital scale in his backpack. Clear intent to distribute. That's not ambiguous. That's not a gray area. But I know why they were doing it. I know because Marcus let it slip months ago, before everything fell apart, during one of those conversations kids have with adults they trust. Their father, Rebecca's ex, had stopped paying child support 6 months prior. Just stopped. No explanation. The boys found out when Rebecca started picking up extra shifts at the hospital and stopped being able to pay for Jake's physical therapy for his shoulder injury from soccer. Marcus mentioned it casually, the way teenagers do when they're testing whether an adult will actually listen or just nod and move on. I listened. I moved on. And I suggested they talk to a school counselor, as if a school counselor could somehow conjure child support payments out of thin air. The sting of that memory feels fresh. I should have done more. I should have asked follow-up questions. I should have helped navigate whatever options existed. Instead, I offered the adult equivalent of thoughts and prayers and went back to my work. Now here they are. The product of a system that failed them, a father who abandoned them financially, a school that knew they were struggling and offered no real support beyond counseling referrals that require resources their single mother can't afford. And me, the person they thought they could trust, about to blow up their futures because they made a stupid choice born from desperation. There's a knock on my office door. I check the time, 4:47 p.m. Most staff should be gone by now. Come in, I call. It's not someone from school. It's Derek Walsh, Rebecca's current boyfriend. I've seen him around the building parking lot a few times, picking up the twins. Early 40s, works in construction, friendly enough the times we've crossed paths. He's holding 2 coffees. Rebecca asked me to leave this for you, he says, setting 1 coffee on my desk. She said you probably haven't eaten today. The gesture is so unexpectedly kind that I almost laugh. Or cry. I'm not sure which. Tell her I appreciate it, I say carefully. Tell her. She doesn't want to hear anything from you right now, Derek says, not unkindly. The boys are pretty torn up. Jake's been on his laptop refreshing his college portal every 5 minutes. Marcus punched a hole in his closet wall. Oh God. Marcus. The one with anger management issues Rebecca and I used to argue about. The one she said needed more structure and boundaries. The one I was supposedly making worse with my controlling behavior. Derek, I'm not here to judge, he says, holding up his hands. I don't know what went down between you and Rebecca. But I know those kids love you. And I know they're scared. Jake's talking about gap years and starting over. Marcus won't talk at all. He just sits in his room with his headphones on, which is worse, if you ask me. I want to tell him that expulsion won't necessarily be permanent. That there's an appeals process. That there's still time for them to present their case. But it sounds like hollow comfort even in my own head. Are they okay? I ask instead. Physically. Yeah, they're fine. The cops were pretty chill about it, all things considered. But psychologically. He picks up the second coffee he brought for himself, takes a sip. They're not okay. And whether that's about what they did or what you're doing in response, I can't tell you. Probably both. He moves toward the door, then pauses. Rebecca told me something when she got home, he says. She said you had a choice to make, and you chose policy over people. She said she understood why, but that understanding doesn't make it hurt less. After he leaves, I sit alone with the 2 coffees. One's already getting cold. I think about calling them. I think about texting Marcus and telling him I'm sorry for not asking more follow-up questions. I think about telling Jake that I believe in him, that one mistake doesn't have to define everything. I don't do any of those things. Instead, I open my email again. But not to Dr. Chen. I find the email from Rebecca's attorney, and notice that they're preparing their appeal. I read through it carefully. They're planning to argue that there were mitigating circumstances. That alternative disciplinary measures would be more appropriate. That the immediate expulsion was disproportionate to the offense. They're not wrong about any of it. I read the sentence again, alternative disciplinary measures would be more appropriate. My hand is on the mouse, ready to open the district handbook and see what those alternatives might look like, when I stop myself. Because the moment I start looking for ways to justify a different outcome, I'm no longer being objective. I'm just trying to find a policy loophole that lets me be the good guy. And maybe that's exactly what I deserve to look like right now. Maybe I need to sit with being the bad guy for a while. Chunk 5. I don't sleep that night. I try. I lie in bed until 2 a.m., staring at the ceiling of my apartment, listening to the radiator hiss and clank in the background. My phone sits on the nightstand, dark and silent. I've read Rebecca's attorney's email so many times I can recite it from memory. The alternative disciplinary measures would be more appropriate. At 2:47 a.m., I get up and go to my kitchen. I make tea I don't drink and stand by the window looking out at the empty street below. Christmas lights are still up on a few of the houses across the way, someone hasn't taken them down since last year, probably, or someone's already put them back up for this year. I can't tell which. The distinction feels important for reasons I can't articulate. My mother used to say that the moment you know you're being unreasonable is the moment you have the power to change course. I remember her saying this during some argument I'd had in high school, I can't recall what about anymore, only that I was certain I was right and she was certain I was being a stubborn ass. She said it gently, though. The way she said everything. Even when I was infuriating her, she made it sound like an observation about the weather. I think about her in that hospital bed 3 years ago. How small she looked. How Rebecca had offered to stay with me, and I'd said no because I thought I could handle it alone. How I'd held my mother's hand while she slipped away, and a nurse came in afterward and quietly removed the machines, and Rebecca texted me asking how it went while I was still sitting there with my hand on my mother's forehead. While you were visiting your dying mother, the accusation had been phrased in group chats. He wouldn't even let her come into the room, that's how the story had evolved. The truth, that I'd asked for space, that Rebecca had offered and I declined, had become something controlling and cruel in the retelling. I'd never corrected people on this. Because correcting people would have made me look pathetic. A grown man defending himself against his ex-girlfriend's narrative about how he treated her. The more I tried to explain, the more guilty I'd look. So I'd stop trying. By 5 a.m., I'm showered and dressed, sitting at my actual desk in my actual office in the pre-dawn darkness. I've driven to school when there's no one here. The buildings feel different at this hour, less like institutions and more like something waiting. The hallways have a quality of suspended animation, like the entire place is holding its breath. I boot up my computer and pull the handbook again. Level 1 violations, detention, parent conference, counseling referral. Level 2 violations, suspension, 1 to 10 days, restitution, parent meeting with administrator. Level 3 violations, long-term suspension, 11 to 45 days, mandatory counseling, potential recommendation for expulsion hearing. Level 4 violations, expulsion. Drug distribution on school property is explicitly listed as Level 4. But the handbook also includes language about administrative discretion in cases where mitigating circumstances warrant alternative approaches. The language is vague, it would have to be, legally speaking, but it exists. It's there. Mitigating circumstances. I think about Jake's shoulder. I think about Marcus punching a hole in his closet wall. I think about the way they both used to come into my office during lunch sophomore year and just sit there, doing homework or talking about nothing in particular, because their house had become a place where their parents fought constantly and they needed somewhere else to be. I provided that. For 2 years, my office had been a safe place. And then Rebecca and I ended, and the twins looked at me like I'd been the cause of it. Like my emotional abuse had somehow poisoned the entire house. A text comes through at 6:23 a.m. An unknown number. Asterisk, this is Marcus. Got your number from the school directory. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I wanted to say I'm sorry. For what we did. For what my mom said about you. For all of it, asterisk. I stare at the message for so long that my eyes start to burn. I could respond. I could write something that confirms I'm not angry at him. I could extend an olive branch. But I realize that any response from me right now could be construed as inappropriate communication with a student in disciplinary proceedings. The very thing Rebecca's attorney might use against me. The very thing that might make me look like I'm trying to manipulate the situation. So I don't respond. Instead, I call Dr. Patricia Chin. It's too early. It's Saturday morning before Christmas. But I know she's awake because Patricia Chin has always been awake. She's one of those people who seems to have transcended the need for sleep through sheer force of will. David, she says, and I can hear the surprise in her voice. Is everything okay? No, I say. I need to talk to you about the Vasquez twins. Before the appeal goes any further. There's a pause. I can hear her sitting up, shifting. Getting serious. Walk me through it, she says. And I do. I tell her everything. The drugs. The distribution intent. The father who abandoned them financially. The guidance counselor referral I made that went nowhere. The fact that Marcus texted me this morning to apologize. The fact that I've been sitting with this for 18 hours and I'm no longer certain what the right call is. Are you asking me to overturn the expulsion? She asks carefully. I'm asking you to take the case, I say. Officially. From now on. I'm recusing myself. Based on conflict of interest. Personal relationship with the students. Uncertainty about my own objectivity. I pause. All of it's true. Okay, she says slowly. Okay. That's actually the right call, David. I'll need everything documented, and we'll need to go through the appeal process properly, but one more thing, I say. I want you to look at alternative disciplinary measures. Long-term suspension, mandatory counseling, community service. I want you to look at whether expulsion is truly proportionate to what they did or whether I was using policy as a weapon against people I care about. She's quiet for a long moment. I'll review everything carefully, she finally says. That's all I can promise. After I hang up, I realize what I've just done. I've removed myself from the equation entirely. I've admitted uncertainty. I've opened the door for the twins to potentially avoid expulsion, which will look, to everyone who doesn't know the full story, like I was just being vindictive all along. Rebecca will see this as me caving. Derek will probably see it as me finally doing the right thing. The twins will see it as evidence that I never meant any of it, that I was just trying to hurt them. Everyone will have a different version of what this means. But the thing is, I'm no longer certain what it means either. Hashtag chunk 6. Dr. Chin calls me back at 9:47 a.m. We have a problem, she says without preamble. The mother's attorney already filed a formal complaint with the district office. She's alleging that you showed bias in the disciplinary process due to your personal relationship with the students. She's requesting that the entire expulsion be reviewed by an external panel. I'm sitting in my office. The sun is higher now, casting shadows across my desk in sharp geometric patterns. I feel oddly calm, which is probably a sign that I'm not processing this correctly. That's actually appropriate, I say. She's not wrong. David, listen to me. This complaint isn't just about proper procedure. She's framing this as retaliation. She's saying you expelled her sons because you were angry about the breakup. She's using your previous relationship with her as evidence of impropriety. Her attorney is arguing that your personal connection to these boys made you either too lenient initially, failing to catch the distribution scheme, or too harsh in punishment as a way to punish her through them. I close my eyes. She's claiming I was neglectful before the incident. That's one interpretation. The other is that you're vindictive now. Either way, it looks bad for you. And here's where it gets worse, the attorney also submitted messages. Screenshots from your office interactions with the twins over the past few years. Nothing inappropriate, but things like, you can always talk to me and, my door is always open. She's presenting these as evidence of an inappropriate emotional attachment that compromised your judgment. My stomach drops. Those messages are part of my job. That's what a principal does, creates an environment where students feel safe. But I can see how they look now, taken out of context. I can see how Rebecca has shaped them into something else. What do you need from me? I ask. Documentation. Everything. Your notes from disciplinary meetings, the evidence of distribution, witness statements. I also need your recusal letter in writing, formally submitted. And David, you need a lawyer. A lawyer? This is officially a personnel matter now. If the external panel determines that you acted with bias, that could affect your employment. You need representation. After she hangs up, I sit in the quiet of my office and think about how quickly things unravel. 24 hours ago, I was the one making the decisions. Now I'm the subject of investigation. My phone buzzes. A text from Derek, asterisk saw the news about the complaint. Just wanted to check on you. We're in your corner, asterisk. News. Of course there's news. In a district of 7,000 students, a story about a principal expelling his ex-girlfriend's kids has legs. It's not hard to imagine what people are saying. What they think they know. I don't respond to Derek because I don't know what to say. By 2 p.m., I've drafted the recusal letter. It's shorter than I expected it to be. Just a few sentences stating that due to my personal history with the Vasquez family, I am unable to maintain the objectivity required for fair disciplinary decisions. I'm submitting myself for recusal effective immediately, pending review by the district office. I read it 5 times before sending it to Dr. Chen. Each time, it feels like I'm signing something away. At 3:15 p.m., the school's main line gets a call from a local news station asking for a statement about the controversial expulsion on Christmas Eve. The secretary, bless her, routes it to the district office without me knowing. By the time I find out, Dr. Chen has already declined comment and issued a holding statement that says the district takes all disciplinary matters seriously and follows established procedures with careful consideration of individual circumstances. It's the right statement. It protects everyone. It says nothing. At 4:30 p.m., I get an email from the teachers' union representative. She's offering support and wants to set up a meeting. She uses the word protection 3 times in a paragraph, and I realize this is no longer just about the twins or Rebecca or even about me. This is about liability and precedent and institutional risk. The irony is suffocating. I leave school at 5 p.m., earlier than I've left in weeks. The parking lot is nearly empty. The sun is already setting. It sets so early in December that it feels like the earth is giving up. I sit in my car for 10 minutes before starting the engine, watching other staff members leave, watching the building darken as people turn off lights and lock doors. My apartment feels too quiet when I get there. Too small. I order Thai food I don't want and turn on the television without watching it. At 7:23 p.m., my phone rings. It's my ex-wife from before Rebecca. Her name is Susan and we haven't spoken in 6 months. I heard about what happened, she says. Are you okay? The question is so genuinely concerned that it nearly breaks something in me. I'm managing, I say. How did you hear? My sister saw something on Facebook. She texted me because she knows we're still friendly. Susan pauses. David, I know Rebecca. I've talked to people about what she was like when you two were together. I know what she's capable of. And I don't think you should take whatever narrative she's pushing too seriously. She's not completely wrong, I say. About what? About the possibility that I was using my position unfairly. I'm not sure anymore. That's the thing, I'm genuinely not sure about my own motivations. Susan is quiet. In the background, I can hear her daughter, my stepdaughter for a few years, playing something on the piano. Badly, with the kind of cheerful persistence that only a child has. The sound is so normal, so wonderfully mundane, that it makes my chest ache. Self-doubt is healthy, Susan finally says. But there's a difference between healthy self-examination and spiraling into paralysis. You made a decision based on policy. You questioned it. You recused yourself. That's actually a lot of integrity, David. That's actually what the system is supposed to look like when it works. After we hang up, I sit with that for a while. At 9:15 p.m., another text comes through. This one from an unknown number that I can tell from the writing style is Jake, not Marcus. Asterisk my mom told us you recused yourself. That you're giving us a real chance at an appeal. I don't know if that changes anything between us, but I wanted to say thank you. I really did mess up. I want you to know I know that, asterisk. I read it 3 times. Then I do what I should have done this morning, I delete it without responding, documenting the fact that I received it and didn't reply. Professional distance. The only thing I have left. Hashtag chunk 7. The external review panel is scheduled for December 27th. 4 days away. Christmas has become this strange, suspended moment where nothing feels real because everything is technically still undecided, even though we all know how this will probably end. I spend Christmas Eve alone. My family calls, my sister in Portland, my brother in Boston, and I let the calls go to voicemail because I don't have the energy to perform normalcy. Instead, I sit with a cup of coffee that's gone cold and reread everything I've written about the twins' case. Every memo. Every incident report. Every conversation documented in my notes. I'm looking for evidence of bias the way a detective looks for a murder weapon, turning everything over, examining it from angles I hadn't considered before. By 11 p.m. on Christmas Eve, I've found things that worry me. There's a note from March where I documented that Marcus was struggling with anxiety about college applications. I'd offered to write a recommendation letter early, before he asked. That's my job, that's what a good principal does. But Rebecca's lawyer could argue it shows favoritism. There's another incident from October where I saw Jake sitting alone at lunch and invited him to eat in my office during my break because he seemed withdrawn. I was concerned about depression. I did what any caring educator would do. Except now it reads like an inappropriate boundary in a document designed to make me look predatory. The thing that keeps me awake until 2 a.m. is a text chain from June. Jake had texted me, personal cell number, which I'd given both boys years ago for emergencies, saying he was having a panic attack before a calculus final. I texted back telling him to breathe, that anxiety lies, that he was stronger than he thought. I checked in on him after the test. That text chain could be interpreted as an emotional dependency I'd created. Grooming, in the harshest reading. I wasn't doing anything wrong, but I can see how someone determined to see malice could reframe genuine care as something sinister. On Christmas morning, my apartment feels like a museum of my own failure. The tree I didn't take down from last year is still in the corner, needles brown and crispy. There are wrapped gifts I bought for the twins in late November, before everything fell apart, still sitting unopened under that dead tree. A watch for Jake. A camera for Marcus, he's been talking about photography as a potential college major. I can't throw them away and I can't open them. They just sit there like evidence of my stupidity. Derek shows up at my door at 1 p.m. with his husband Mark, carrying Chinese food and determined cheerfulness that's both appreciated and excruciating. We're not letting you sit in this apartment alone, Derek says, pushing past me with bags of takeout. That's final. Derek, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. I'm doing it anyway. Mark, get the plates. They move through my apartment like they own it, opening cabinets they've opened 100 times before, setting out food, pouring wine. There's something profoundly kind about how little they acknowledge the elephant in the room. They don't ask me how I'm holding up. They don't talk about the investigation. Instead, Mark tells a terrible story about a disastrous office Christmas party. Derek laughs until he snorts, and for maybe 40 minutes, I almost forget that my career is in freefall. But then Derek's phone buzzes, and he glances at it, and his expression shifts slightly. What? I ask. Nothing. Well. Something, but maybe we don't need to talk about it today. Derek. He sighs. There's a parents' group email chain circulating. People who aren't even familiar with the full situation are weighing in. Some are defending you, which is good. But some are saying that regardless of whether you were biased, you should have recused yourself earlier, before making the expulsion decision. They're saying it looks like you're only stepping back now because you got caught. I did recuse myself, I say quietly. That's the point. I recognize the conflict and stepped back. I know that. I'm just telling you what people are saying. Mark kicks Derek's shin under the table, a subtle rebuke. We weren't supposed to tell him. This is why you didn't get the lawyer job, babe. You can't keep secrets. Despite everything, I almost smile. But it fades quickly. Is it bad? I ask. It's social media, Derek says. Everything looks worse than it is. By next week, people will have moved on to something else. Someone will find out that the school crossing guard violated parking code or something and the entire conversation will shift. He's being kind, but he's also being dishonest, and we both know it. That evening, after Derek and Mark leave, I get an email from Dr. Chen with the hearing agenda for the 27th. The external panel will include a retired superintendent, a parent advocate, and a lawyer specializing in education law. They'll hear testimony from me, from the twins, separately, without their mother present, which is something, from the students who witnessed the distribution, and from Rebecca. My hands shake when I read her name in the agenda. I haven't spoken to Rebecca since she picked up the boys after their suspension. She looked at me across the school parking lot like I was a stranger, or worse, like I was exactly the person she'd been telling people I was all along. The kind of person who uses power to hurt the people who love him. At 11 p.m., I get an email that stops my heart. It's from Jake. An actual email to my work address, which is the formal channel, which means it's documented and official and careful. He's copied a counselor from the school as a courtesy. Principal Hayes. Asterisk, I'm writing to request that I be allowed to make a statement at the hearing on December 27th. I want to tell the panel what actually happened in my own words. My mother's attorney is advising against this, but I think it's important that you hear from us, from me and Marcus, directly, not just through other people's interpretations, asterisk. Asterisk, I take responsibility for my actions. I also want the panel to know that your recusal was the right thing to do, and not because you did anything wrong before. You didn't. You were kind to us, and we repaid that kindness by lying to our mother about the things you said to us, the ways you tried to help us. We did that. We made you look bad because we were angry about the breakup affecting our mother, asterisk. Asterisk, I wanted you to know that. I don't know if it changes anything. But I wanted you to know, asterisk. Jake Vasquez. I read it 7 times. Then I forward it to Dr. Chen with a note. I did not solicit this communication. Please advise on protocol. But what I'm really thinking is, what have I done to these kids? Because the truth is, I still love them. And I'm about to destroy them to prove a point about integrity. Hashtag Chunk 8. The hearing room on December 27th is colder than I expected. All those years as principal, I've sat in rooms like this, disciplinary hearings, grievance meetings, parent conferences that went sideways. I've always been the authority figure. Today, I'm the accused. The panel sits behind a long table. Retired Superintendent Wallace is in the middle, gray-haired and careful, the kind of administrator who's seen every permutation of institutional failure. To her left is Thomas Chen, the parent advocate. He looks sympathetic, which somehow makes it worse. To her right is Patricia Okafor, the education lawyer, and her expression is completely neutral in that way that suggests she's already thinking 3 moves ahead. I'm sworn in like I'm at trial. My attorney, Susan, sits beside me. She's advised me to keep answers short and factual. Don't volunteer information, she said this morning over coffee. Don't get defensive. Don't try to explain your emotions. Just answer what you're asked. It's good advice. I hate it. Superintendent Wallace asks me to walk through my decision-making process from December 23rd onward. I do it carefully, documenting each step, each moment where I recognize the conflict and attempted to manage it. I talk about the mandatory expulsion policy, about how it exists precisely to prevent situations where personal relationships corrupt institutional judgment. But you didn't recuse yourself immediately, Patricia Okafor says. It's not a question. You made the initial determination to suspend them pending investigation before stepping back. I made the determination based on the facts, I say. 2 students were caught in possession of a controlled substance with intent to distribute. That determination would be the same regardless of who the students were. Would it? She leans forward slightly. You had a personal relationship with these boys. You'd written them recommendation letters. You'd had private communications with them about personal struggles. Is it possible, just possible, that in the heat of the moment, you prioritized punishing them because your relationship with their mother was strained? Susan's hand finds my arm. Warning. It's possible, I admit. It's possible to question any motivation if you look hard enough. That's why I recused myself. But only after someone, presumably Ms. Vasquez, challenged your authority. I recognize the conflict myself, I say. I emailed Dr. Chen about it the same day. She nods slowly, reviewing her notes. You did. Before Ms. Vasquez contacted the superintendent's office. That's in your favor. It's a small concession, but it's something. The students who witnessed the distribution give consistent testimony. They saw Marcus and Jake with a backpack, saw money changing hands, saw them dividing something white and powdery into smaller bags. No ambiguity there. The school resource officer testifies about the search, the discovery of methamphetamine in Marcus's locker, the documentation of the chain of custody. Then Rebecca takes the stand. She's dressed carefully, not too formal, not too casual. Strategic. Her attorney sits a few rows back, watching. She describes our relationship in soft, regretful language. How I was initially wonderful. How I gradually became controlling. How I isolated her from friends. How I was overly involved in her son's lives. Did he ever hurt you? Superintendent Wallace asks. Not physically, Rebecca says. But emotional abuse doesn't leave bruises. It leaves damage you can't see. It takes everything I have not to stand up and tell her this is a lie. But Susan has specifically told me not to react. You react, you look guilty, she said. You look angry, you confirm every narrative about you being controlling. So I sit. I listen to the woman I love describe our relationship as a cage she was desperate to escape. Jake testifies next. He's smaller than I remember, somehow. 17-year-old courage, dressed in a school uniform like it's armor. My mom told me that Principal Hayes was emotionally abusive, Jake says carefully. She told us he was manipulating us, trying to drive a wedge between us and her. She said the texts he sent me about my panic attacks were inappropriate. Okafor leans forward. Were they? No, Jake says. He was helping me. But I was angry at him for dating my mom and then breaking up with my mom, and I wanted to believe what she was saying. So I told her things he said and did, and I made them sound worse than they were. I told her he was always trying to get me alone, when really he just noticed I was sad and checked on me like a good teacher does. You lied to your mother, Okafor says. Yes, Jake says. And then I told her more lies because I was embarrassed about getting caught dealing drugs and I wanted her to be angry at him instead of at me. Superintendent Wallace glances at me. I keep my face neutral, though my chest is cracking open. Did Principal Hayes know you were dealing drugs? She asks Jake. No, Jake says. He had no idea. If he did, he would have reported it. Are you certain of that? Yes, Jake says. Because he's the kind of person who enforces rules no matter what, even when it costs him everything. The hearing breaks for lunch. In the hallway, Derek finds me. That went better than I thought, he says quietly. The damage is done, I tell him. Whether I'm officially exonerated or not, half the city thinks I'm a predatory asshole who uses his position to manipulate teenagers. The other half knows better, Derek says. That matters more than you think. Marcus testifies in the afternoon. He's more guarded than his brother, but the testimony is similar. He confirms the drug dealing was his and Jake's decision. He confirms that Principal Hayes, he keeps using my title, formal and distant, never knew, never encouraged it, and treated them fairly even while their mother was spreading lies about him. When it's over, Superintendent Wallace thanks everyone for their time and says they'll issue a written decision within 5 business days. 5 business days. Which means I go home and wait. The decision comes on January 4th, the first day back after winter break. I open the email from Dr. Chen during my planning period, hands shaking. The panel found no evidence of bias in my initial determination. The recusal was appropriate and timely. No violation of professional ethics. The expulsion decision was justified by school policy and facts. The recommendation, the expulsion stands. The twins will not return to Lincoln High School. But there's a second recommendation, added by Superintendent Wallace personally, that I consider requesting a transfer to a different school, not because I did anything wrong, but because the district has a responsibility to manage the perception of institutional credibility. In other words, you're exonerated, but you're still toxic. I'm reading it for the 4th time when there's a knock on my office door. It's Marcus and Jake. They're not students here anymore, so technically they shouldn't have campus access, but no one stops them. We heard, Jake says. About the decision. You got what you wanted, Marcus says, and there's no bitterness in it. Just fact. The rules applied equally. Even to us. I'm sorry, I say. And I am. I'm sorry for all of it. We know, Jake says. He extends his hand. We're sorry too. I shake it. Then Marcus shakes it. And it's not forgiveness exactly, but it's something real, the acknowledgement that we all made mistakes, and we're all living with the consequences. After they leave, I email my resignation to the superintendent. Some integrity is worth the cost.